The Baltimore Ravens and Roquan Smith get the deal done. 5 years, $100 million. We talk about why it was the right move for both sides and more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here over on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here with us, tuning in, making us your first listen today. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount of entry. These first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. And we're back. Big news for the Ravens on Tuesday. Here to talk about that with me is Jake Louque, one of the hosts over at the Baltimore Beatdown podcast, writes over there for Baltimore Beatdown as well. And Jake, this is news that I think a lot of people have been wanting to hear for a while. The Roquan Smith extension, 5 years, $100 million. Now, the timing of it, we have a wild card weekend matchup with the Bengals. Now we have this Roquan Smith news. Football's alive right now in Baltimore.
Yeah, it's funny, and it feels like maybe the universe was conspiring for us a little bit because we had been trying to make me hopping on here happen the last couple of weeks, and finally we carved a window out. And of course, the one day that we do is you'd think it would just be a run-of-the-mill Tuesday heading into super wild card weekend, but yeah, here we go. Roquan Smith locked up 5 years, $100 million, about $60 million guaranteed, and it's looking like he's going to be a big part of this defense and a centerpiece for them for the next several years at the very least.
Right. The football gods were saying, just wait on the episode. We'll give you big news to talk about if you wait a month. So we finally get Jake on the show. I'm excited to talk about this with you because I think for Roquan, this was a deal. Obviously, Baltimore goes out, gets him for a second and a fifth round pick, a deal that I thought was really good for them at the time with the caveat that they would have to sign him to this extension. So let's talk about the extension first of all. Do you think this was an overpay, Jake? Do you think it was an underpay? Do you think this was just right for the Ravens? How do you think they did in this deal?
No, I think they did pretty much just about right. I mean, he's making just a little bit more than Fred Warner and Shaq Leonard, some of these guys that have set the market at this position a little bit. The conversation becomes, do you want to pay that type of money to an off-ball linebacker is sort of the buzzword going around today about him. And, I get some of the trepidation. I understand it to a certain extent, especially if people are kind of a little bit anxious about what that's going to mean for the wide receiver position, what that's going to mean for Lamar Jackson's contract. I think if anything, this helps them in the Lamar contract situation, at least. So that's nice. But yeah, overall, I think it's an investment I was very much willing to make. I think people maybe get a little bit too caught up in he's just an off-ball linebacker. So all he does is run defend. If you listen to my co-host Spencer talk about him, he's very effective against the pass, helps eliminate tight ends similar to Kyle Hamilton. And yeah, he's just been a force in the middle of that defense. I think part of what makes him more valuable than the traditional quote unquote off-ball linebacker, I think you look at two things. I think you look at him just eliminating run plays and gaps, just being very disciplined and just blowing up run plays, turning what would be a 5-yard gain into a 2-yard loss. That is a huge demoralizing thing for an offense to have to deal with, going from that sort of 2nd and 5 range into like a 2nd and 12, for example. So that's a big part of it. And then splash plays, man. I mean, the play against the Steelers where he nabs the interception, I believe he's been involved in a couple fumbles as well. He's just been all over the field. And I think, it's hard to quantify. And I understand, like I said, some of the trepidation about the quote unquote off-ball linebacker. But when you're that good and you've played up to your number, which he has, I'm totally comfortable with it. And this defense, man, like it's not a coincidence. And a lot of people have pointed this out, that he gets there and they go from bottom half of the league to top 3 total. I mean, he has just been that much of a identity bringer to a defense that really needed one.
Yeah, he's an impact player for sure. And I know that, a lot of the pause, I guess, is that, you can bring a safety into the box. You don't need to have 2 inside linebackers on the field at all times. It's not a premier position, but I do think that he works in Baltimore's defense. And he's faster than some of these running backs out there, so he is a fast player, sideline to sideline speed. He gives you what you need there. And I think with being able to bring him in and keep him for 5 years, you're able to build around him and obviously the Marlon Humphreys and the Marcus Williams. Now you have, I think, a really good foundation set in stone with still some other really solid rookies like Kyle Hamilton and Travis Jones and young guys like Justin Madubuike. They have a foundation on defense. And Smith definitely adds to that. But it's interesting, Jake, because people are also talking about not only what it means for Lamar Jackson, but what it will mean for Patrick Queen moving forward. Now he gets this big money, Roquan Smith. Does this do anything for you? And we still have some time before Patrick Queen, we have to have a real conversation about an extension or moving on from him. For now, it's great to have both those guys for multiple seasons, but do you think this does anything to maybe the future of Patrick Queen?
Yeah, I think it maybe says that I think they chose their guy. I think it is going to be Roquan. I like Patrick a lot, but ultimately, I think Roquan is the one that they wanted. I think Eric DeCosta actually talked about Roquan a good bit ahead of the 2018 draft, which when they openly talk about a guy like ahead of a draft, you can tell that that's going to be a player that they at least want to be linked to. And obviously, they were never going to get a chance to get him. And then I think, if I remember right, I remember DeCosta like mentioning him in the years since. So I just think this is a guy that he's had his eyes on for a very long time. It's nothing against Patrick Queen, who has played well, who played well even before Smith's arrival, which some people don't seem willing to acknowledge, and has played very well after his arrival too. I think Queen's got a future in this league as a starting inside linebacker. Is it going to be in Baltimore? I don't think so, because he's played well enough that I think he is going to get himself a solid second contract, and he might be priced out of that second linebacker spot there in behind Roquan. So.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about these big time extensions, you can't sign everybody. So if Queen were to be one of the odd men out, it'd be a loss for sure, because I think if you were somehow able to get Smith and Queen under contract together while having Lamar there too and the other guys, it'd be really great. But with the Lamar contract, we've seen it. They weren't able to bring back Zadarius Smith. They weren't able to bring back Matthew Judon. So you have to kind of make sacrifices somewhere with some of these big deals. Maybe it is Patrick Queen. Maybe it isn't. So we'll see. We still have time with him in Baltimore, though, so we don't have to worry about that right now. But, Jake, I think this was the right move both for Baltimore and for Roquan Smith. I mean, it seems like Baltimore really believes in what Smith brings to their defense, the elevation that he has provided them. Do you think it was the right move for both sides?
Yeah, I certainly do. I think Roquan is. It's funny because I think he really got drafted to one of the perfect teams that could have gotten him with the Bears. They weren't super competitive over his tenure. He was involved in a playoff game, I believe, but they value inside linebacker, and they have a pedigree there going back to Brian Urlacher and Mike Singletary and all those guys that have donned that uniform and played really well at inside linebacker. I think the other franchise that similar to the Bears in that regard is the Ravens. And yeah, it just feels like he is, like I said, an identity forming guy that you can completely build your defense around. You saw guys congratulating him too. You saw Marlon Humphrey, who listen, it's hard to get a serious take out of Marlon a lot of the times. And when he's going on there and kind of like gushing about Roquan Smith, I thought that was kind of cool to see. Lamar Jackson actually kind of tweeting a little bit today, something about Uncle Ro earning that bag. It's funny they call him like Uncle Ro. I'm just learning that now, and I really enjoy that. So yeah, it just seems like a perfect match from both sides to me.
Yeah, and Humphrey, well, it's not actually him on there. It's with someone else. He's sending the take to somebody, and someone else is putting it out there. So whoever it is, but it seems like, the players are really happy for him. And this is a deal that I think, again, a lot of people wanted to see based off of the impact, off of the draft capital, and $20 million average annual value does put him, you mentioned it, over top of guys like Shaq Leonard and Fred Warner. So he is now, by proxy, the highest paid inside linebacker in the league. Very well earned, very well deserved. But Jake, what kind of excites you about a future with Roquan Smith in Baltimore? For me, it's somebody who is able to, again, cover linebackers or cover running backs and tight ends as a linebacker out of the backfield. The Ravens have struggled to do that in recent years, but also the sideline to sideline speed, the leadership. It feels like he's become a Raven over his short time in Baltimore. It feels like he has really bought into the culture, bought into the team. But I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, sideline to sideline ability is kind of the one thing that leads into what I'm excited about. And that to me feels like he's just a something out of nothing guy. Like that pick against the Steelers, that just felt like it came out of nowhere. He was just kind of lurking there in the middle of that defense. And Trubisky was kind of slinging it all over the field in that game. And it felt like he sort of turned the tide with his interception. That sort of turned things over for Queen to go and get one of his own. And then Trubisky lofted up a lollipop for Marcus Williams. And it just feels like he's a total and complete tone setter. He's the guy who, when he's out there having a good day, they're going to have a good day. And other than that second Steelers game where he struggled a little bit, he's had mostly good days. So I think the guys are going to feed off that energy. I think it's just going to be fun to watch him as a vocal leader for another kind of good box that you can check there in the middle of that defense. It's just it's a home run all around for me.
Yeah, consistency. I think he's played really consistent. I mean, over 9 games for the Ravens, he's had 86 tackles. He had 83 with the Bears in his games there. So he's been solid for them, and I think he's going to continue that play. Definitely moving forward here. And in a defense that, again, has really been elevated since coming in. And I think you call it the Lamar Jackson effect on offense. It's the Roquan Smith effect on defense. That's what it is for sure. But coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving into a bit of that Bengals rematch, the rubber match between Baltimore and Cincinnati. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by TurboTax. You can go to TurboTax and meet with experts who will do your taxes for you. TurboTax experts can relieve you from the stress of taxes and file for you so you can do not taxes. Show your eyes things that are not taxes. Unpack a moving box of not taxes. Taste not taxes. Sing not taxes lullaby. Hope not taxes. Sleep through the night. Grab a saddle and ride not taxes into the sunset. Where TurboTax, an expert, will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. It feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax. Full service products only. Video meeting will expert does your taxes required. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. And this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. And I'm super excited to tell you about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game, also in Football GM. And if you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager or managing your football franchise, your dream can come true, and this game is 100% for you. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team. You can play through the season and lead your team to glory. You're responsible for things like hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and navigating your franchise through free agency in the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season. And all this in a challenging, realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. And the Locked On NFL hosts, we're having a little competition, so you can do the same thing with your friends and your family. Locked On Ravens listeners, it'll 100% free boost with their franchise. We need your promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. Download the game. This is at ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. We are back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oshlecker still here with Jake Louque of Baltimore Beatdown. And Jake, Roquan Smith, super exciting stuff. But we have playoff football in Baltimore. We got the rubber match. It's 1-1 between Cincinnati and Baltimore. The Ravens got the Week 5 Sunday night matchup. The Bengals got the Cincinnati game. So now we get them combined Sunday night in Cincinnati. And I talked with Spencer yesterday, and we both felt like there were positive takeaways from that Week 18 game. Even though it was a loss, they were able to do a lot in terms of, I think, kind of stifling the Bengals offense a bit, even though they got off to that fast start. This was an offense that was resting players too. I mean, did you see positive takeaways in that game?
Yeah, I think I did. I thought the defense played hard. Like, I think Darryl Worley, he gave up that touchdown to Jamar Chase, but other than that, he played hard. He prevented another one that could have gone to, I believe it was Chase. And yeah, it just, it felt like they played with a chip on their shoulder. You talk about Roquan Smith. I mean, that guy, he drew the ire of some Bengals fans and some Bengals players. Let's just say that. He had an attitude out there, and it wasn't just this sort of soulless, faceless type of play that we had seen from the defense in 2021, where it's just, yes, Jamar Chase, like, catch the ball and just run through our defense and just completely, bee slap us, for lack of a better term. And I think he really showed the attitude. The rest of those guys really showed the attitude. They really wanted to try and go and force that coin flip, which is kind of a funny way of looking at it. But they wanted to. I think the offense, I saw some positive things as well. Maybe a little bit in keeping with the Mark Andrews-Ewing theory, because Andrews was not out there. It felt like they spread the ball well. I thought Isaiah Likely, obviously a career day. I thought he looked great. Charlie Kohler, promising, with a couple catches mixed in there too. Running game looked strong as ever. And I think if you can couple that running game with some strong play from the tight ends, including Andrews, and then maybe get, hit a few Sammy Watkins plays or two here and there, like you really have been as well with the last couple of weeks, I think you could maybe have a chance of keeping this coming game close. So thought it, was an impressive performance, all things considered.
Yeah, Watkins was physical. He was a physical receiver at the line, getting separation from the corners that the Bengals have. And I think when talking about the offense, obviously 4 turnovers is not going to win you a football game, unless it was that Cleveland game a couple years ago, which somehow they won with all those turnovers in there. But with Lamar Jackson, I know hopefully, we don't know yet, but if he's able to come back in this one, I think that gives the Ravens a really good shot, at least a puncher's chance at the very least, to win this game. So Jake, with everything you've kind of heard and seen about Lamar, his status ever since leaving in week 13, do you have any feeling, whether it's a gut feeling or anything else, that Lamar's going to play in this one? What's your overall thinking?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. My heart, my gut says yes. He's just going to go out there and tough it out, because I don't think he's 100%. I think he might be closer to 70 or 80, optimistically. I think he is going to, speaking from that perspective. Speaking with my head, I'd make it not to be too glib here, but it's probably a coin flip, right? 50-50. So it's one of those things where we've been talking about this going back a month plus at this point, and there is nothing that is going to make me feel 100% concrete that he is going to be out there under center on Sunday until I see him walk out there for that first play. It's just, what can we really do at this point except wait and see, which sucks to say as an analyst, but like, that's just kind of where we're at, right?
Right, and I think Jackson obviously gives you the best. I think even Jackson at 70% gives you the best chance to win. Now if he's like not 100%, which at this point of the season no one really is, but depending on how the knee feels, he's not gonna maybe be the Lamar Jackson 100% healthy, fresh start of the year. And again, nobody's fresh in the playoffs. Everybody's taken those hits. They've gone through this stuff, but depending on where the knee is, it could limit him in some aspects, whether it is as a passer or as a runner. So I still think he gives you the best chance, and whatever happens, I think today on Wednesday is a huge day. If he's able to come out for this practice, and maybe by the time people are listening to this, he's already either practiced and limited or he hasn't practiced. But this is going to be a big day, I think, in terms of what the status for Jackson is going to be on Sunday night. Maybe the fact that it's a night game gives him that extra little couple hours to get him back on the field is like just wishful thinking, but we'll see. So I'll move to the other side of that, Jake. If it is Tyler Huntley, if it is Anthony Brown, do you think Baltimore has a shot then?
I don't. I mean, it sucks to say that for a playoff game, but it's just like, what have we seen from Tyler Huntley that would make me think he could go into Cincy and keep up with an offense like that? And Anthony Brown, I thought he was honestly promising. Like, if I had to pick, I'd probably pick Brown to start that game because it felt like he moved the ball and was a little bit more explosive than Huntley has been. He was more volatile with the turnovers, which are tough, but he would probably be the option that I would go to. But ultimately, it's just this Bengals offense, I think, is very talented. Joe Burrow actually missed on a couple throws in that game. So if he hits on those like he does, I think more often than not, or maybe more often than we at least saw, then I think the Bengals will certainly be running away with this one. So yeah, man, I think you need Lamar out there. You need him to win this game. And I don't know, that's at the very least, that's a statement on his value. So maybe he could take that as some contract negotiations when his number is going to be up here yet again in the offseason.
Yeah, he is the heart and soul of this team. And obviously, even though the offense struggled a bit after the bye with him in there, we know what a Tyler Huntley led offense is at this point because we've seen there's enough of a sample size where, he's not going to put up 25, 30 points a game. And against this Bengals offense, you can't really like completely stop them. You have to kind of just be able to push down their production. So if this defense, which again has played very well, can hold them under 20 points, if you have Lamar, I think you definitely have a shot. But can Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown go over that threshold? I mean, we'll see. I think we saw some positive things, but at the same time, Jake, I think what Baltimore can do against Cincinnati, regardless of who's out there, is out physical Cincinnati. Obviously, you kind of mentioned drew the ire of some Bengals players, some Bengals fans for quote unquote dirty play. I talked with Spencer about it yesterday. Did you see anything dirty from Baltimore?
I mean, like, there was a little bit of stuff after the whistle. Certainly, I thought Smith kind of going out of his way to bump Chase in the end zone. That was intentional. Like, he was saying, like, "Hey, man, get out of my way." Like, that's what he was doing. Some of the other stuff, I couldn't really make head or tail of it. Like the hit, I think it was on T. Higgins. It might have been Chuck Clark when he was going up to try and high point the ball, and Clark played the receiver. That's what you're supposed to do in that situation a lot of the time. And I don't know, man. It just seems like they're trying to make something out of nothing, which is in keeping with what the Bengals have been doing the last couple of weeks. They're trying to rile themselves up and put a chip on their shoulder and tell themselves a story about how they, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon and Joe Burrow, how they're somehow the underdog in all of this. The league's trying to screw us, this, that, and the other. I'm not buying it. I didn't see it really to much of an extent at all with the Ravens on Sunday with all this physicality that they're talking about. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. There was maybe a little bit of that, but like I said, the Ravens were trying to rile themselves up in turn and play with an attitude because they didn't have much of a chance in that game without one. So,
and I think again, there's so much you can't do as a defender in this league where it's like, what do you want the defender to do? It's almost like the Jawan Johnson touchdown against the Saints where they kind of let him stroll into the end zone. Marcus Peters has him on the sideline, and he kind of didn't want to push him out of bounds for fear of a late hit, it looked like. And then Chuck Clark kind of let him go. So with the T. Higgins hit was clean. It wasn't like they were trying to take him out of the game or do anything dirty. They had a Tyler Boyd hit. I think that was Chuck Clark as well, where Clark just levels Tyler Boyd on the sideline, but it didn't hit him in the head. They weren't trying. And the Ravens, like, to me, I said it yesterday, aren't that kind of organization. Like, they're just not a dirty organization. Will they play physical? Oh yeah.
The distinction between dirty and like intentionally like malicious, right? Like you can have like a dirty play. Like I guess you could technically call the T. Higgins high pointing, like, yeah, it was maybe a little dirty, it was a little rough, but like I don't think Chuck Clark was like trying to hurt him or like trying to intentionally do anything. I think he was just trying to play physical through the whistle.
And that's what it is, where AFC North football and football in general, I mean, it's a physical sport. You're going to get hit. You're going to get kind of thrown around a little bit. And that's what it is. It's not like they were headhunting, which obviously you're not supposed to do that and you shouldn't do that. And that's not what they were doing.
Eagles know a thing or two about headhunting too with some players in their past, but we don't have to get into that.
Look, I loved Vontaze Burfict coming out of that draft at ASU, but he obviously fell to the 7th round for a reason. And while he was a good player, Dirty, I think, followed him around for a lot of his NFL career. So I think in terms of physicality, I think Baltimore does have that edge if the Bengals are going to react that way. And look, I expect this wild card game, it's going to be physical to the max. Roquan Smith, you talked about it. He was playing with his hair on fire. I mean, how much physicality do you expect?
Yeah, I'm expecting a good amount. I think to our point, like even if Lamar plays, he'll probably not be 100%. I just think the Ravens are really going to need to like try and bring it. And I think they are going to be firing themselves up and be, telling themselves a story of their own about how they're going to have to go out there and completely bring it against an offense that is really talented, maybe the most talented offense in the league, pound for pound. That defense is going to have to play with their hair on fire, and they're going to have to stay step for step with those guys. So I think they're going to go into the bag of, if not tricks, then the bag of physicality to try and stick with those guys. And then on the other side of the ball, you got Tyler Linderbaum and DJ Reader. They were a pair of the guys that were mixing it up in the last game. I think we're going to see more of that matchup, and I think we're going to see some more playing through the whistle there. J.K. Dobbins is a guy who in his short career has not shied away from that type of stuff, and he's going to be somebody that this offense is going to be counting on to run through. So, yeah, man, I'm expecting Sunday night under the lights. I think this is going to give me some vibes of Bengals Steelers 2015. Not quite that bad, where Antonio Brown's life was potentially altered. Speaking of Vontaze Burfict, I don't think or want to see any of that kind of stuff happening, but I think it's going to be a hell of a war, to quote Tony Siragusa.
Yeah, I think for Baltimore, it's going to be chippiness to the max. Well, for both teams, chippiness to the max. And we'll see. This is AFC North football. It's a divisional rivalry. These two teams are looking to extend their seasons and honestly knock the other out. Like, I think it'd be sweet for both of them. If they were to end their division rival season, that's what they're playing for. But obviously, the bigger goal is to extend their playoff run to the next round, which would be for the Ravens, a trip to Kansas City, barring a Dolphins upset of the Bills in that wildcard round. But coming up in the final segment, we'll be diving a bit into some mailbag questions, John Harbaugh, Greg Roman, the whole 9 yards. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to talk about on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and we are now in that fantasy basketball season as fantasy football is now over, and I am undefeated. But again, my stars are injured, so I need my role players to step up. But if you need another twist on fantasy, be sure to check out Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super easy to play. They have a ton of current games in format and current entries that you can use. And how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will go score more or less in their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times the amount in their entry. There's no competing against other people. It says you versus projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, the NBA, the MLB. You have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have save and vest withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive an $100 deposit match up to $100 or promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On and sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with Jake Louque. And Jake, we do have some mailbag questions to get into here, and we actually have a question about Odell Beckham, which I think it's far too late for, but I'll read it anyway. He says, Rumble, any update on OBJ? Too late in the year to sign him if we beat the Bengals? My answer to this is yes. I think if anything, that'd be an off-season move if they were to get into that, but I don't. Is there any shot for you as a playoff signing?
No, not as a playoff signing. I mean, we're less than a week away from that game even being played. So that doesn't seem feasible to me, unfortunately, but I do like it a lot as an offseason signing. I was actually thinking about that a little bit today. Like, it sounds like behind the scenes that I don't know if I would say discussions were had, but it sounds like the Ravens were really trying to kind of catch his attention there. And with the way the other team sort of wound up rebuffing him, especially with the Cowboys putting on the full court press and then just all of a sudden pulling away and deciding to go with T.Y. Hilton. Maybe that doesn't speak great for his health, but I suspect by next September, he should be fine to at least be, a decent version of the Odell Beckham that we've seen. And I would like that a lot for the Ravens. But as far as a playoff signing, I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, I think for now they're kind of, for lack of a better word, stuck with what they have. And they're not really going to be able to bring somebody and get them up to speed, and then there are the questions on top of that about his health. But yeah, I agree. In the offseason, I don't think it'd be super expensive to sign him, bring him in on maybe a prove-it deal, 1 or 2 years, see what he has. I mean, he's super talented when he's fully healthy and he's on the field. So I wouldn't hate it at all for the Ravens, definitely. But another question here we have from Silky Johnson, who says, will Bengals fans proclaim there is a fix when the Ravens blast them on Sunday? Well, first the Ravens have to get there and actually beat the Bengals. But in terms of any fixes, I mean, it'd be there's been plenty of back and forth banter between Ravens and Bengals fans on Twitter, at least. Jake, I'm sure if the Ravens beat the Bengals, there'll be plenty more of that.
Yeah, I got to think so. It's been an interesting couple weeks to say the least here. And I struggle to imagine what a victory on Sunday night is going to look like. Even with Lamar out there, I think it's going to be an uphill battle. So yeah, exciting stuff. And I think I certainly might lose my sanity a little bit if they're able to pull it off.
Yeah. And I'll ask my own question. How funny would it have actually been if there was a coin flip?
It would have been I don't think the world would have been able to handle that, honestly, with the way that the Bengals fans would have reacted to it. That would have been incredible with the way that their players, then Zach Taylor would have reacted. That would have been great for one thing. I think Ravens fans would have had a lot of fun with it. I certainly would have gotten great content out of it. It definitely is the living embodiment of the Virgin Chad meme with the, you've got the Bengals like screaming and then the Ravens are the Chad over there. Like, I hope we call tails. Like somebody made that and that was great. So yeah, it would have been great for content. It's unfortunate we didn't get it, but I think the game itself, they'll be bringing plenty of that baggage, that emotional baggage into it. The Bengals will. So we'll at least get treated to it in some respects, I think.
Yeah, and I know they said that it was going to be like in a media room with like Goodell calling in, but they really should have milked it and like had it happen right at like midfield. Like they bring out like Justin Tucker, or like they do like a whole pregame. They should have like
Dude,
really.
You and I know the NFL. They would have turned that into a prime time, just absolutely like must watch event. They would have blown that thing out, sold tickets, and and listen, they would have made money off it. They would have profited. That's the NFL at this point.
I think many Ravens fans would have if they said we're going to do this tomorrow, and I think Ravens fans would have traveled in bunches to go see that. I would have considered it. I would have done it.
Yeah, listen, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can spend your hard-earned money on, and that I wouldn't begrudge anyone for doing it for a spectacle like that.
Yeah, a 2-second coin flip with plenty of fireworks around it. But another question here we have from Lamar or Bust, and he says, is this team going to come together to get Greg Roman a going away present for his last game? Well, I hope it's not Greg Roman's last game. I hope they win it. But if this is another wild card exit, my whole thing, Jake, has been complacency, where the Ravens, they're good in the regular season for the most part, right? They make the playoffs. But my thing is not to get complacent with wild card round exits or divisional round exits. I want to see growth out of them. So I've always said, and I've been consistent saying, I want to see them make the AFC Championship this year. I think that would show growth to me. So if this is a wild card exit or even a divisional round, my personal opinion is that Greg Roman probably gets let go. Are you in that same boat?
Yeah, I certainly am. I've been there for a little while now, and it feels like you mentioned growth. Like it's hard to grow when you're really not trying to. Like they've been running the same offense for 5 years at this point. That's a really long time to run one offense. I mean, think about it. Like if you have one bad year as a coordinator, you're out. If you have one good year as a coordinator, you get hired away. And Roman is in the unique position where he wasn't really as attractive of a head coaching candidate. And I think that's why everyone kind of lost their minds when the Stanford opportunity opened up. And I do think it's unfortunate that he didn't get that, because that kind of would have taken care of that problem. But yeah, dude, I think it's time to move on. And whether they go to somebody in-house and they run something similar, but they at least iterate it off a little bit, I'd even be fine with that. Whether they do like a Matt Weiss out of Michigan, who's maybe got some similar ties, I'd be okay with something like that. Just shake it up a little bit. And it would probably help to know what the quarterback situation is going to be for one thing, but I'm ready for a change either way.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of grown stale. Like, I don't think Greg Roman is a bad offensive coordinator. I just think I want to see Lamar in a different offense at this point. See, kind of have him spread his wings a little bit. Go out there and get him a DeAndre Hopkins, get him a Brandon Cooks, a DJ Moore, someone who I think could be better utilized in a different offensive system that I think tailors to more of Lamar Jackson's strengths, not just some of them. And I think Baltimore, they can grow as a team still. I think they still have that opportunity, but I think it does start. If there's not an AFC Championship appearance, or like if the Ravens win the Super Bowl, I doubt Greg Roman goes anywhere, right? But I think at the same time, there still needs to be some type of change. So I think if this is a one and done, if this is a divisional round, one of the things we maybe see is a Greg Roman firing here. But Jake, another question comes from Baltimore Fats, who says, how hot is John Harbaugh's seat right now? One of the more intriguing questions, because I know there are plenty of fans who are in the John Harbaugh corner. Others are in the fire John Harbaugh corner. But how hot do you think his seat is right now?
I really don't think it is. I don't think Bisciotti really takes that kind of stuff into account. I think he sees the playoffs as job security. I think he sees his relationship with John Harbaugh and really Eric DeCosta as kind of a triumvirate. I think he sees that as something that he's not only comfortable with, but that he can win with, and he has won with. And Bisciotti's just not a guy that's going to make wholesale changes just to make them and think that that's going to improve things. I think he's a guy, given his business background, as a guy that says, if you have something good, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's try to make incremental changes. And I think above all that, though, I think he is a smart guy, and he recognizes that changes do need to be made. And one example is, and a lot of people forget about this, is after the 2017 season, he sat down at their annual sort of end of year meeting with the general manager, which was still Ozzie at the time, and with Harbaugh, and he said, I'm tired of what I'm seeing right now, of this bad back Joe Flacco lumbering around with no wide receivers and all this kind of nonsense that we've been doing on offense. We need to spice things up. I want us to play an attractive brand of football that's going to sell tickets. I want to get that building rocking again. And they managed to do that by say whatever you want, looking back on it these days. But they went and got Jackson. They built a successful offense around him. And just really made the best of that for several years. So maybe it's time for, if not something as wholesale as that, maybe go ahead and make some changes, kind of have that uncomfortable conversation again. And I think everyone will be better for it.
Right. And I think for what the Ravens have right now, even like around the league, some of these more tenured coaches like the John Harbaughs and the Mike Tomlins of the league, where I know there's been controversy in terms of has their time run out with their organizations. I think if you are the Ravens, or even, grouping the Steelers in, you have to be certain, like more than certain, that you are getting a better coach than a John Harbaugh, John Harbaugh's a good coach. Now, is he perfect? No, there are flaws. There have been game management issues this year. There have been multiple decisions where you're kind of questioning. I'm not saying John Harbaugh is free of all blame and everything that goes on. He's the head guy. He's going to have that blame. And when things go wrong, he does deserve some of it. But at the same time, he has rallied this team. And while I do think Lamar did probably save his job in 2018, I think he has taken that and really built relationships with players. Because remember, he was not like that in the early parts of his career, where, they had the calling to Jesus meeting in 2012 and everything like that. So I think he is he's shaped differently now as a coach than he was. And while there are certainly flaws in his approach, as there are every coach, I just think if you're Baltimore and you do make that move, if you do make a John Harbaugh firing, you have to be more than certain that he's actually, there's going to be a better coach coming in as opposed to a John Harbaugh in that situation.
Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to imagine that world where you're going to get somebody who is going to come in and not only do what he did between 2008 and 2012, but even do what he's done the last couple of years. Like, franchises don't consistently make the playoffs. And I know that, like, everyone wants to say, and I've made this point on our show about, like, oh, well, just making the playoffs shouldn't be the Ravens' goal. Like, they should be aspiring to the Super Bowl. And you're absolutely right. But, when they say that, there's always this snark about, like, because Spencer will make the point of, go be a Lions fan, go be a Jets fan. And they're like, oh, well, we don't have the same aspirations as those franchises. Those are quote unquote poverty franchises. And it's like, you're kind of right to an extent. Just making the playoffs maybe shouldn't be looked at as this end all be all thing, but they're doing it consistently every year, minus last year, right, where everything kind of went wrong. They've been in there 3 of the last 4 and for much of John Harbaugh's tenure. So that should not be taken for granted, being able to do that consistently. So that's the one thing. When you talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that is the one thing that I really would point to as the fact that he has raised the floor of this organization. Could the ceiling be higher? Yes. And I think they need to make some moves to help facilitate that. I don't think John necessarily should be the guy leading that charge, but he does give you a very solid foundation, a solid floor, if you will.
Yeah, so in terms of hot seat or not, I think that we'd see Greg Roman leave before John Harbaugh. I don't think it'd be like a group deal where they fire both and kind of start fresh there. I think it would be Greg Roman first, and then if things really don't go well, there's more complacency, then you can have that conversation. But I think for now, at least John Harbaugh is probably safe moving forward, at least this offseason, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But our final mailbag question comes from Lucas Box. He says, who will Lamar be traded to if he refuses to play on the tag? Well, we have to see what happens with the extension, but I don't know. It seems like the Jets are a team that's been linked. Miami always. I mean, do you see him? It's weird to kind of envision him in another uniform, but where would that be for you?
AFC team feels kind of like a no-go to me, just for the conference, intra-conference situation there. Got a weird feeling about Atlanta. You know, they went after Deshaun Watson hard and they struck out hard on that. Desmond Ridder not really doing much for me. I think that Arthur Smith offense would be a good fit. And I do think that they have picks that they could make a compelling offer. And, you know, maybe, hey, how about you throw in Drake London or something like that? And then you can use those picks and Drake London to build around whatever quarterback option you're going to be bringing in. But, I mean, I hope they hang on to Jackson. So, and I'm sure we all do. But, yeah, Atlanta weirdly does kind of stand out to me.
Yeah, hopefully it's Baltimore. That's what hopefully the Ravens are able to get a deal done, and that's what it is. But Jake, all right, prediction time. Do you have the Ravens winning this game, wildcard weekend? Do you think they advance, or do you think we're talking offseason next week?
You know, Kevin, I got a rule that I never pick against the Ravens in the playoffs, so I'm going to go Ravens win this game 24-23.
All right, one play. If it comes down to Justin Tucker, a kicker battle, I'm taking Justin Tucker over Evan McPherson, who, look, McPherson's a great kicker. The Bengals have really gone a step further with that to say maybe he's better than Justin Tucker. I do not agree with that at all. I'm taking Tucker over McPherson, absolutely. But that's all I have for you, Jake. Thank you so much for hopping on with me. Please tell people where they can find your work and what you're working on.
Yeah, you guys can check us out at Baltimore Beatdown Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. You can find me on Twitter at Jake Louque. That is Louque. And you can follow our show on Twitter at Podcast Beatdown.
All those links will be in the description below. Of course, check it out. Jake does great work, obviously, with Spencer as well, the duo over there at Baltimore Beatdown. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, it'll be more Ravens talk, continuing to preview that Ravens and Bengals matchup. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.